Hello? Hello? Somebody out there? Oh, Darkwood Brew viewer. Phew. You really had me going there for a second.
And he said to me in that moment, he said, "You're beginning to sound like that communist Desmond Tutu."
What was it inside of me that helped?
Buddhists call the monkey mind, which is the
I
rational.
know that one.
But I think there's more at stake here than simply the historical question. What Paul's getting at is, where do we find our identity?
What kind of world would we live in if we would reject anything to which we did not agree with 100%?
We're hung up on this idea of the afterlife, and we're forgetting about the here and now. We're forgetting about life before death.
Do you love me? Then love me with all your soul.
We aim to create an intersection between justice, spirituality, and art.
We're here at the Wild Goose Festival on Saturday nights, and I'm with about 300,000 of my very best friends. Welcome!
If you hear this as just a piano sound, well, in a sense, you're sort of limiting yourself to that. You're kind of shutting off all possibilities. But if you think about it just in terms of sound, and even better, in terms of sacred sound, you know.
There's a celebration of all that is reality, lived experience, things that they can see and feel and touch.
This is the grave of iPhone 2.
Is like there was sort of a cheerleading kind of attitude going on, sort of like love wins, eat it, you know, like. And I found in my own heart, I would sometimes get very angry and argumentative with people who didn't agree with me that love wins.
There were no drugs involved, no sex, no alcohol, no nothing. It was just simply two of us talking about this God stuff.
Luther responded, and he said that good works simply grow from a good heart, and that if you are full of the love, grace, mercy, faith of Christ, that you will naturally do good works. And I think it's one of the most dramatic and compelling sorts of pieces of theology out of the Protestant Reformation, and one that Protestants have very little followed themselves.
I was watching Darkwood Brew one night, and boy, the guy just ran on and on and on and on and on.
How tragic it is that for a lot of people, if they don't have Jesus as their get out of hell free card, they can't see any value in Jesus. And you know, if I had hair, I'd pull it out.
You know, Facebook, it was about 7-3 with evil over temptation, but here it's a really tight. Lead us not into temptation, I think, may have just taken over.
It's lead us not into temptation. It's not just a personal thing.
How do you understand simplicity?
I don't see simplicity as the opposite of complexity. I see it as the opposite of scatter.
And I felt I was really being called because what was being revealed to me was that the music I was playing was really a form of prayer.
Because God's been faithful too many times. I've been through those valleys so many times that I trust him a lot better than I used to.
I am drawn not just to the visually beautiful, but to our ability to be conduits of grace in the world.
God. The awe and wonder of realizing that God is far more majestic and powerful and mysterious than we could ever know.
It's the heavy, drunken glory.
They got to the edge of the promised land, and the spies came back, and they all said there were giants and walled cities, and we look like grasshoppers in their eyes. But Joshua and Caleb said, that is all true, but if God is with us, we can do this.
I like to define hope as being able to see light at the end of the tunnel and believing that it's not a train.
I believe there are some debts that we can never repay, and I believe there are some words that we can never unsay. When
first gave me fidelity, I have to tell you, I thought,
You wanted to curse God and die?
I thought, oh dear Lord, I've been married to the same man for 56 years. We're going to talk crap.
To me, Darkwood Brew is an intellectually stimulating spiritual journey that takes me to places that I would never have found before.
It's a major leap forward in what the church can do. It combines virtuality and physicality in a way that's unique. It's the promise of the future. It's where it's going to go.
Darkwood Brew is shared.
It's amazing. Darkwood Brew is awesome and grounding.
Challenging.
Innovative, cutting edge, think tank, mission outreach for Countryside Church.
Darkwood Brew is uplifting. A hoot.
Darkwood Brew is an anomaly.
Darkwood Brew is a refreshing experience in today's world.
It's like a spiritual explosion.
It's a new way of doing church. It's church beyond walls.
Darkwood Brew is stupendous.
Darkwood Brew is mind expanding.
Darkwood Brew is the epicenter of a spiritual renaissance.
Well, for those of you who were here, or at least in the congregational meeting a couple of years ago, you may wonder, where did this all come from? Why Darkwood Brew at Countryside Church at all? And there are really two streams that fed into this. One was a need in the world, and the other was a specific need at Countryside Church. Just to reiterate the need of the world, the original inkling of idea for something that was like Darkwood Brew came in 2006 in the middle of that walk across the country that I participated in, Crosswalk America. We'd walked halfway across, we hit Kansas City, and we were a little bit frustrated because we kind of thought it would be like this Bay of Pigs, like let's start a conversation about where religion is taking our country, and the oppressed masses will rise up and they will, they'll spark a national conversation about this. But what we discovered was that the press has no interest in people who are walking across the country speaking about peace and love and inclusion and intellectual honesty and faith and so forth, and refusing to castigate those who are being felt to misrepresent that faith, only walking for the positive. So we hit Kansas City in the middle of the walk, and religion did make the front page of the Kansas City Star that day, but it wasn't progressive Christians walking for peace and justice and compassion. It was Jimmy Baker's been out of prison for 2 years now, and he's doing great in Branson. And we thought, what did we have to do to get any kind of conversation going? Do we need to stand naked in the public square or what? Well, the next day, we were walking in Missouri on the freeway there, and I don't know what it is about Missourians, but they must be filthy rich because we found more loose change along the freeways of Missouri than any place else. That day, we were just picking up change right and left, but I saw this one thing I thought was a quarter, and I bent down to pick it up, and I realized it wasn't a quarter. It was this little piece of metal there, and stamped in the metal was this question, what moves you? I thought, well, that's weird. But I thought, I've got the rest of the afternoon to walk. That's a pretty good question. So I was asking, what is moving me during this walk right now? Well, one thing that was moving me was how deeply felt the need was in the grassroots for something like the faith that we are enjoying every week, especially as articulated in the Phoenix affirmations. People were really coming alive when they would hear about those things, saying, oh, so I'm not crazy. So this kind of more generous spirited faith is really part of the core of it. I haven't seen that, where I thought I was only alone, I was all alone, or my little group was the only group who thought that way. Time after time, we just ran into this. It was life-changing for so many people just to hear that you're not alone and that you're not crazy. The other thing that was moving me was the amount of people who were gathering in even the grassroots. I mean, the most rural conservative areas of the country, there were house groups gathering just people finding each other, trying to explore a more generous-spirited form of faith. There were Higgins, Texas, population 400, people gathering, driving 70 miles just to find community this way. The other thing that was moving me was the fact we couldn't get any doggone publicity. That was making me mad. And the realization that if we can't rely on the secular media to tell our story for us, as more progressive Christians, they're not interested. We need to become the media. And the fourth thing that was moving me was the fact that just 2 days earlier, NPR had reported on the first ever streaming internet video program. It was Amazon Fishbowl, it was called, and Bill Maher hosted it. It was kind of a hokey show, but the bottom line was it was streamed for the first time ever. You can actually stream video in broadcast quality. And I was thinking, they did that program for a fraction of the cost it would take to do broadcast television. And suddenly, all those four things came together in my mind, and I remember running down the hill that I just walked up to meet up with the walkers I was ahead of, saying, I've seen the future, I've seen the future. We don't have any money as progressive Christians, but we can actually, the internet changes the whole equation. We can actually become the media very, very inexpensively and maybe get out in front of this, and so that we don't have to have the billions of dollars that the fundamentalists have invested in global satellite networks and 1,500 radio stations across the country and expect, oh yeah, we're going to have a message that's going to get out there. Well, that was very moving, and we tried an experiment in my last church with this and a version of this, but it proved to be so labor-intensive that it became clear to me that it would pull me out of parish ministry altogether if we were to actually receive funding to do that. And so I gave, at that point, I'm a parish minister first, everything else second, third, fourth, and fifth. And so I lost all interest in it and just kind of wondered, why did God seem to be tugging at my heart like this and run into an absolute dead end? I have no idea, but that was that. Forward to Countryside Church. I was here 2 years, and over the course of those 2 years, we had two things happen that was provoking a serious need for us. One was our 11 o'clock service was trending, more and more attendance, and we were thinking, and it wasn't that the sanctuary couldn't hold people, but our parking lot was getting rather full, and we were thinking, well, we should probably be looking right now at when we could start a third service to help reduce that parking situation. And so that was one piece of it, but the other thing that was even more pressing was our small group ministry. We'd started this vast small group ministry here, when it first came, and people, signed up. We had over 200 people in small groups, and as long as we were going through a book study, it was great. But then we were going to turn to the Gospel of Luke. You may remember that the Joy Luke Club series. We were going to, as a whole congregation, go through Luke one chapter every single week and take it all those weeks, another half a year. Well, the small group folks were so excited, they actually signed, even after going through a 6 months Bible study already, or book study, they signed up again for 6 months of Bible study. The only problem is we couldn't get a doggone leader to lead one, hardly. So nobody wanted to lead it. And when we asked them what's up, they said, well, we want to participate, but we don't want to lead. Well, why? Oh, far be it from me to teach the Bible. I'm not a scholar. I can't do that. So then we tried to bribe people. we said, okay, we'll give you the best commentary ever written for lay people. It was that one by Bruce Van Blair, my pastoral mentor. He's awesome commentary. You will have no problems. No. So finally, we flew Bruce out, and he and I taped 10 minutes per chapter talking about the book of Luke. We said, okay, we'll give you a book, and we'll give you a DVD. How's that? Total game changer. All the leaders said, okay, we would love to do this now, and they started using that DVD and saying, okay, this makes doing Bible study easy. So then it became clear, like, okay, every time we do a book study, we can get all these small group leaders and small groups, but every time we want to turn to the Bible, we're going to have a problem unless we give people a more robust resource. And yet there's like almost next to nothing out there to do that provides that kind of robustness in the way that we felt was high quality. So then we're like, okay, well, we'll figure out a way. You know, you may recall Bruce was here as an interim before Chris came, and we thought, okay, Bruce is here. We're gonna do Galatians next, and we're just gonna do this. We're gonna tape it. Neither Bruce nor I could find the time, to do that. I was like, oh my, this is gonna get really bad really fast. We're gonna lose our whole small group ministry. And so it was coming together those two things, the need for a third service and the small group ministry, that suddenly it dawned on me, wait a minute, what about that old idea about, streaming stuff over the internet? If we did it differently than I had configured it in Scottsdale and set it up much more smartly so it wouldn't draw me out of parish ministry, but actually focus it on the worship services rather than creating new episodes that had nothing to do with the worship services, which I was doing in Scottsdale. We actually made it parallel that, created a worship service, filmed it, hired a filmmaker to cut it up and use it as DVD resources, and then invite the world to fund it for us, so that we're actually creating these resources for ourselves, but through sharing it for the world's paying for it. Maybe we could do it. And so that's, we started discussion of the church council. I asked for permission to go, and I had somebody who I thought might be interested in funding such a thing. And to make the long story short, we did find a family who were I knew from previous years, who worked with both me and also Chuck Moronic, and we asked them for a lot of money to put in essentially $300,000 worth of capital equipment here, which this is actually a high-tech internet web studio, not simply a coffee house. And of course, before it was coffee house, you know what it was like. To put in all that equipment, put in streaming equipment into the sanctuary, upgrade all that stuff so we can be streaming from the sanctuary as well. Anyway, $300,000 there, and then to fund 2 full years of Darkwood Brew, with the idea that funding in the future then would be funded through foundation grants and through viewers and so forth. So that was the genesis of Darkwood Brew. And incidentally, just so I can just clear away one concern, which we'll address later, but people have been wondering, what would this ever cost us? Well, Darkwood Brew costs, still, it's a fraction of the amount of money compared to broadcast media. But the amount of money that the congregation, when we voted to accept those funds from the Ravenscrofts, we said and promised that Countryside would never, ever be asked to fund more than the musicians that play at our third service. And that's it. If the world community cannot fund this program, then we won't continue it, bottom line. So let me just clear that right there. We'll get into that more detail later. So what has happened? Well, original objectives that we made for the grant were these. That we began broadcasting in October 2010. Well, we were a month late. On that. One of the things we told the Ravenscrofts originally, too, and we told you, is that our best wisdom in this is we have no idea what we're doing. And it's true. It's true, because Darkwood Brew doing this kind of interactive thing, it had never been done on Earth. We're the first on the planet to be doing this fully interactive programming like this. So we had no idea what we're doing. We're going to learn our way into this. That's why we needed the 2 years funding to just figure out. In fact, we didn't anticipate our worldwide debut until fall of 2011, figuring we're just going to be making mistake after mistake. We don't even want to tell people we're doing it until full year after it. But we have 50 of the greatest volunteers ever on the planet, working with Darkwood Brew. I mean, they poured their heart and their soul on it, so we were actually ready to go make our worldwide debut in January of 2011 with the Beatitude series. And we decided we would be refining small group resources, and we've made a continually doing that with our own. You guys help in the small groups helped us continually refine those resources. We put out formal questionnaires, too, to people who are outside of our congregation to refine those. We said that we'd have, in that first 2010-11, we'd have 60 small groups in churches using our resources. Well, we didn't hit that goal, sorry. We had 140-plus groups, small groups and churches using we exceeded that goal, sorry. But it has been a great joy to see that so many people around the country using these things. We thought we'd have a live audience in the hundreds. Well, that's the interesting thing here. Our live audience actually rarely exceeds 100 at Darkwood Brew. But our our recorded audience is in the thousands and thousands. So the live audience is actually a tiny fraction. We didn't anticipate that. But the recorded mode, it's like, oh yeah, everybody DVRs their television programs. That's what they're doing with Darkwood Brew. So we have now a recorded audience in that first year of in our time, over 2,000, approximately 2,000 people a week. Then we would do fundraising to secure resources, and now over and above what the Ravenscrofts have given during this last year, we've made actually only scant appeals thus far, because what we found is when you're on the internet, you're asking for money. In a religion-based television program, they automatically think about like the Jimmy Bakkers and those people are always hitting up people with money. So they're very sensitive. So we want to make sure to clear to our internet community that we're not simply after their money. So we've made only scant appeals, and nevertheless, thus far we've collected $75,000 from the world community to help fund the future of Darkwood Brew. Ongoing objectives for 2013 and above is beyond is funding development, which we'll hear about later. We'd said 100 small groups in churches by the fall. Well, we've already exceeded that, so now we're after 200, and more. And actually, what we ultimately would love to do is create a network of at least 500 churches over the coming couple of years, churches and small groups who could actually be using these resources. And I'll get into, and then eventually 1,000 small groups well beyond 2013 probably. But where we actually become part of a network of people who are, it's not just us broadcasting our wisdom out to these people, but it's them bringing their wisdom back to us, because this is an interactive piece. It's truly a work of the people on a worldwide basis. Just a couple of, briefly, you have handouts that will extrapolate on some of the milestones. There's too many to mention right now, so I'll just simply highlight a few. We started on January 2nd to the worldwide audience in 2011. We had 20 small groups using Countryside small group resources, and we've continuously had about that many using those resources. In May of 2011, it was kind of a freaky thing. Our viewership actually exceeded our total Sunday morning attendance, our weekly viewership online, which is like weird. It's like it was like hard to wrap our minds around for a while. And then later on, another highlight, we won a $15,000 new media grant project. This was a group at Union Seminary who studies the creative and innovative uses of new media in the religious community. And they said that Darkwood Brew, by far, is one of the best examples out there of anything we've seen. So they gave us a grant. They sent a researcher to study our stuff. They published this big study about Darkwood Brew. Funny thing about that study is in this doctoral thesis kind of like study, the interviewer says, the weird thing about this whole Darkwood Brew thing is that basically none of them really know what they're doing, and yet they're accomplishing this extraordinary thing. And that's the beauty of the new media, is actually you don't have to be some television mogul or whatever to do this. You simply have to have patience. If you have patience and you have heart, you can do this thing and pull it off. Another thing to highlight is we hit our 100th small group using Darkwood Brew resources about August 2012. And then in August also, that same time, our monthly views of recorded videos, that's not counting the live audience, exceeded 7,000 for the first time. Later on, just shortly after that, Phyllis Tickle, who you saw in the video there, who's been to Countryside, wrote about Darkwood Brew in her book that was just released in September called Emergence Christianity. We just posted a video clip of Phyllis commenting more about Darkwood Brew. Maybe we'll show it at the January meeting. This is like one of the world's foremost experts about what's going on in North American Christianity. And when she's looking at what's really helping lead the way, she is writing about Darkwood Brew being an integral part of that process. Finally, then in November, that's this month, we broke an all-time record of viewership again. We keep on hitting this. We go on plateaus, and we do this exponential leap. And we'll go plateau, exponential leap. Right now, we've broken 8,000 views of our recorded videos in 1 month. And then lastly, just week before last, Bangor Seminary was out here. Their president and the head of their New Century committee was out here because they are folding up Bangor Seminary after 200 years of being a seminary training church ministers, but they are deciding to make it a death and a resurrection. And so they're going to, they have about a $9 million endowment, and they're looking to create the Center for 21st Century Ministry. And we're looking at models for what 21st century ministry looked like. They said we need to come to Countryside Community Church because Countryside Community Church is a big piece of that model. Not just simply Darkwood Brew, but the whole way we're operating. They came to all of our services and then spent a whole day in conversations with us and left very excited people. So that's just a brief overview of some of the milestones. I encourage you to check out those others on your sheets.
So we've got quite a bit of information just to highlight. Reverend Allen brought up touched on them. We're going to delve into it a little bit deeper, a few things. So we'll move on to first just the countryside benefits from this whole project. The video first, sorry.
Hi, my name is Nicholas Obradovich, and I am AV engineer at Countryside and at Darkwood Brew. The technology that Darkwood Brew has brought to Countryside assists us in every Sunday at worship. With this board, we have it paired with another board in the control room that allows us to record the sermons and record the whole services for DVDs and online use. The DVDs are sent to shut-ins, and if there's special music or guest soloists, if they would like a DVD, we send that to them. With the technology and gear that Darkwood Brew has provided, next year at Countryside, we'll be able to stream the 9 a.m., 11 a.m., and special concerts and events live online to people around the world.
So just to go through quickly on some of them. The big part of that was we went from the AV connections between the sanctuary and the commons. So we can do things, share what's happening in the sanctuary in here, and we can do vice versa. So there's a lot of integration that happened with the whole infrastructure that came with Darkwood Brew. We upgraded from analog to digital. The cameras in the sanctuary are HD compatible, or run HD, and then we also run the cameras that are used in Darkwood Brew. We use them for making some of the countryside moments, the videos that you've seen in church. As Nick said, we're looking at trying to stream the services out so that if you aren't here, you can actually see it, get on the computer and see them. And Center for Faith Studies lectures. Other things, the fellowship that's seen here is a result of the remodeling that was done for Darkwood Brew. We are now, funerals used to do their receptions afterwards downstairs. Almost every funeral, at least since I've been here, and it's been about a year, have all done them up here because they really love the space. So just having this space has been integral to when we do have people that have memorials and funerals. We have been able to share some of our technology with other people. The Tri-Faith group in town did a video for them. They came in here and used our stuff to do that. Inglorious Pastors Podcast does theirs here. That's Scott Frederickson. You'll hear from him in a moment. And we were able to use our cameras away from Countryside proper. So there's infrastructure. I'm going to ask Cindy Kugler and Ed Bach to come up next. And Cindy's going to just talk about quickly what the benefits that Darkwood Brew equipment and infrastructure has had on Center for Faith Studies. And Ed's going to just talk a little bit about what do we actually have and the quality of it.
I'm glad that isn't switched around the other way because I'd be in real trouble being able to talk about technology. I think most of you know that the Center for Faith Studies preceded Darkwood Brew here at Countryside. But man, have we grown into a rich and valuable relationship. It has been, at least from my point of view, very mutually beneficial. So just to back up a little bit, in 2004 we started the Center for Faith Studies as kind of an umbrella concept here at Countryside for some changes in adult education. And one important piece of that was the lecture series. And that grew from the idea of just having a single keynote lecture a year to, in fact, then we got more and more excited. And well, the next year, well, my gosh, we got to have 2. Oh gosh, there's at least 3 people the next year we really want to host. So the whole thing grew. And now we're up to committing to anywhere between 6 and 8 when we put out our brochure in the fall. But we always add on to that. So we can end up with 10 easily. And this has been a wonderful ministry that I have enjoyed offering and helping to lead here at Countryside with the help of so many volunteers and the staff and the community. And why did we think this was important? Because we identified that it was something that wasn't happening in the community otherwise. At least we couldn't find another organization that was presenting a series of lectures on a regular basis where the entire interfaith community was invited to either participate or to come and be a part of planning and partnerships and so on. So that was unique. And then we began to hear, as it grew a little bit and people learned about it, that there were people outside of Omaha that couldn't easily get here to be here in person, but oh, they wish they had something like this. In small towns across Nebraska, in small towns in Iowa, South Dakota, then we heard of a group in Texas, and so I began to keep a file and thought, if we ever could figure this out, how we could electronically let them be involved with this type of activity, wouldn't that be so cool and valuable for them? Literally, ministers that's out in outstate Nebraska that said, we have nothing. They were not being fed themselves so that they could lead their churches. People that taught Sunday school, just people we knew because we have large extended family all over Nebraska, and so we would hear about it in their towns and their churches. They were just crying for some of this richness. So boy, we wanted that to happen. And when Eric got here, I said, here's a file, here's something that would be fun to look forward to developing if we could. Time flies, Darkwood Brew becomes a reality, and immediately became a way to tell people about these things that were going on at Countryside. And then gradually we began to let them watch them. We would post them on I'm going to get all these words wrong, but post them on a platform where they could watch them as podcasts later on. Well, what even became better than last spring, we were able to finally start streaming live through the Darkwood Brew technology and website and so on. So people could click on and watch them live and participate in the Q&A through iChat and so on and so forth. So last spring, we had Isabel Wilkerson and Grace Wolf Chase. Mark Davis was this fall. We had Robbie Weissman and Leon Bass were the Holocaust survivor and liberator story, and Frank Schaefer. Nicholas is able to tell me that they can track the number of people that logged on to watch this. And at the time, it's anywhere between 50 and 100 watching it live. But then the podcasts later of all those people added up to 1,000, actually 999. But that was, and Frank Schaefer was 700 of those. So this was amazing that people are showing a great interest in doing this, and we just want to keep on expanding that. We also are participating in helping support small groups out there, and I know you're going to hear more about that, with DVDs of some of these speakers that come to town and then record interviews with Eric. And we have those edited down into wonderful pieces that small groups can use out there to add resources to their group activity. So that's it in a nutshell from Center for Faith Studies. But it has been a very rewarding relationship and an important relationship for Center for Faith Studies.
Ed, if you could just say a couple words on technology.
Sure. I'm Ed Bach. I'm the chief engineer at Fox 42 and KXVO here in town. I have a bachelor's degree in theology and an associate degree in electronics, which I guess kind of uniquely qualifies me to speak to this this situation. I've spent about 25 or 30 years involved in radio and television broadcasting, building facilities, and things like that. The facility that you have here is very good technically. It's the same type of equipment that broadcast facilities are going to. You're actually a little ahead of the curve in that regard. There's a number of things that this unique facility and the way you're using it are actually out in front of what we can do in the world of broadcast. First of all, you can hit the whole world instead of being limited to a specific geographic market. Secondly, you can target your audience. In the world of broadcast, we kind of have the ability to go, you're going to watch this program. And too often the viewer goes, no, I'm not. I'm changing channels. We're thrilled if 1% of the people who can get our station actually sit there and watch a program. But this gives us the ability to hit the people who actually want to see this and participate in it. Thirdly, as Dr. Elness mentioned, there's a real cost benefit here. The cost, the investment that was made, the cost of maintaining it, the cost of staffing it, and so on, is far less than what it would be in the world of broadcast television. So there's a very good economy of scale there. And fourthly, the fact that the web is inherently two-way gives you a really profound opportunity to build community. We can't do that in the broadcast world. We try to kind of piggyback on Facebook and things like that, but the use of chat and so on really builds that piece of it.
Thank you, Ed. And the one other piece of infrastructure is the volunteers that we have. We have, as was mentioned, about 50 volunteers, baristas, 15 greeters, 3 deacons, 6 lighting and tech volunteers. There are 26, and they come weekly to help support the production of the Darkwood Brew each week. And we've asked Bob Newell to just say just a moment why he's involved with as a volunteer and what it does.
Thank you. My name is Bob Newell. I'm an alcoholic. I got the wrong notes there. Hang on a second. No, actually, these are the right notes. I am an alcoholic. I've gone to AA for a very long time. AA saved my life, and it continues to do so. Darkwood Brew kind of saves my soul. There's some things about Darkwood Brew that really make me feel like I'm plugged in. It resonates with me spiritually. I've always been an out-of-the-box kind of a guy, so traditional religion never did work for me very well. Darkwood Brew allows me to, what it does, to me, it examines the human condition and the human side of the Bible and its teachings, and it brings it back to me in a way I can digest it. It validates that I'm not alone in how I perceive God, religion, and spirituality. And it's okay that I can question and still belong to Countryside Church. You talk about these different groups across the nation that are maybe like me and they don't have anything. And how fortunate and how blessed we are to have a Countryside Church here in Omaha, but to have this Darkwood Brew tool that we can now share with other people, and they can say, wow, I do belong somewhere, and this plugs in for me. Eric always talks about the sweet spot. You need to find your sweet spot. And me volunteering at Darkwood Brew, what I do is very similar to what I do when I get paid. I work part-time as a union stagehand, and when I work there, I get to do concerts and Broadway shows and things like that, and I get to use my skills. And I get paid very well for it. When I come here, I get to use my skills, and I get paid very well for it. But it's in here as opposed to in my wallet. It'd be nice to get paid in my wallet, but I'll take it in here. So I do it because I love doing it. And on my own accord, I wouldn't attend the church all by myself. My wife kicked me, dragged me, scratched me, begged me, and got me to come here. And Countryside is part of my family now. And when I'm not volunteering, when I'm on vacation, I've been known to find a computer and log into Darkwood Brew so I can be a part of this family because it does spiritually float my boat. Thank you.
In addition to the technology that Darkwood Brew brings to Countryside, it also brings a wonderful resource for our small groups. Each week, over 20 small groups in the Countryside community receive a guided version of the Darkwood Brew episode.
Well, the Darkwood Brew ministry provides us what they call the nugget, and we use the nugget as really the launching post for our discussions in small group. It's usually about anywhere from 20 to 40 minute excerpt from Darkwood Brew the week before that we'll use as the whole basis for our discussion.
Darkwood gives us an opportunity to discuss things that we might not normally find. It gives us, like you said, the resources that it would provide to us, and they vary every week depending on the speaker, but it gives us something that would be more difficult for us to find.
We'll watch it as a group. People ask us to pause it, stop it, so we can discuss something at some point in time, but it's an integral part of what we do in our small group.
Although we're facilitators, there's often not a lot of facilitation we have to do. It just kind of organically moves throughout the group.
How would your small group be different if you didn't have this resource?
I'm not really sure we could meet as a small group if we did not have that resource, because we view it as a group. It's a sounding board for our discussions, and really I'm not sure we would continue to function without Darkwood Brew Nugget to start our discussions off.
However, this is not just a local resource. This resource is distributed to many small groups outside of the Countryside community who may not have access to progressive theology in their area.
Welcome to Darkwood Brew from Bangor Theological Seminary, Bangor, Maine. Greetings, Darkwood Brew, from your friends in Sedona, Arizona.
So you heard a couple of people from inside small groups, the Hess's small group and Bob Lannon's small group use the resources on a weekly basis. I'm going to just ask Scott can I say your Scott? Come up here and just talk about a little bit about his work and outreaching to the small groups outside of countries.
Thank you, Daniel. Yes, I'm Scott Fredrickson, Chris's husband. I want to talk about a certain segment of small groups. The work that I do at Darkwood Brew is primarily gets to experience how people experience Darkwood Brew who aren't part of Omaha. And what's interesting, we took 100 small groups, and we took 35 of them from large congregations throughout the country. None of them were UCC. They were Lutheran, Presbyterian, or Brethren, and they were in places like North Carolina, Michigan, Minnesota. And we also took about 25 congregations from outside, from other UCC congregations here in Nebraska. And then we took another 40 congregations or so from our friends from Center for Progressive Renewal, which is a parachurch organization based out of Atlanta, Georgia. And they hooked us up with another 40 congregations or so all across the country, not necessarily of our denomination. And these people all participated in one another. They took one of our DVDs and they all went through it to various degrees. And some of them have actually given us feedback. And the feedback that we have received so far has always been 100% positive. People love it for many reasons. Perhaps the greatest reason is many congregations struggle to find the kinds of resources that Darkwood Brew presents. As a professional theologian, I can honestly say that Darkwood Brew brings speakers to conversation in a way through Eric or Chris that doesn't happen everywhere else, anywhere else in some cases. Some of the speakers that we've been able to get, quite frankly, someone like Brian McLaren, you just can't get Brian McLaren to talk about the things that he's been able to talk about in Darkwood Brew. And this is so vital in some ways to what people are trying to understand, because the things that someone like a Brian McLaren has to say has to get out there. And it can't get out there if Brian McLaren is stuck talking to 60 people in Port Washington, Washington. It gets to those 60, But the other 340 million of us who live in this country and the other 7 billion of us who live on this globe don't get to hear it. And Darkwood Brew presents us with a chance to let someone like Brian McLaren take the issues that he feels God has called him to think about, to write about, to live about, and find a place for him to be able to go out and be able to share with people in Rebersburg, Pennsylvania. One of the things I found out about this, by the way, I'll tell you this, Eric, just as an old friend. We've got towns in this country that frankly need to change their name. But wherever they happen to be, they can find Brian McLaren. And there's no other way for them to be able to do that except through something like Darkwood Brew. So everybody has loved it for the fact that it brings to them resources that they don't have. So I went in and I talked to a few of these congregations, and one of the things that was most interesting, I went to a big church out in Michigan, and I talked to the people. They had this small group of ladies. They were, it's in the Lutheran tradition, it's called Women of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. They go by the acronym WELCA. And they have been meeting, as far as they can tell, most of them have been meeting since 1951, okay? 1951, so if somebody do the math and come up with more than 50 years. They do this Darkwood Brew thing, all right? And they actually, the quote that the lady said to me was, it helps us share in a way that we have never shared before. You kidding me? The last 50 years, it never occurred to you to talk about some of this stuff? That's amazing. It's amazing what God does with people. People who have real, actual experiences, one-to-one, across a table. That's something like Darkwood Brew with all its high-tech stuff and all this wonderful whatever we got running through these walls that are probably giving us cancer. Yeah, like you didn't think about that one 2 years ago. He's like, Melanie, let's make sure the health insurance is working. But amidst all of that, the value, of course, comes when two ladies, at least 50, who've been talking together for 50 years, can say things to each other that they've never said before. And it's this kind of value that allows us at Darkwood Brew to continue to make a difference in the lives of people. Real, actual people with real, actual lives. To be able to help them see that God is at work not only here in Omaha, but all across this planet. That God has not left anyone, although they may feel like the only people in Sheridan, Wyoming who think that gays don't have to be burned just because they're gay, or have to be strung on a fence post like Matthew Shepard. And they can come here and realize that although there might not be a lot of people in Sheridan, Wyoming who think that way at this time, they're not alone. And they get together with 3 or 4 people there in a place like Sheridan, Wyoming, or a place like Rebersburg, Pennsylvania, or Walled Lake, Michigan, or Minneapolis, Minnesota, or even here in Omaha, or outside in other places in Nebraska, and realize that there are other people who are struggling with those same issues. So it's a great blessing for me to be able to talk to people who aren't necessarily connected with Countryside, but are connected to us through Darkwood Brew Ministry, to be able to see that the things that we value and the things that we hold for our God and for what God is doing for us in Christ Jesus can be shared with people all across this planet. Thanks.
And that goes right into outreach.
We started attending Darkwood Brew right from the beginning because it sounded like a really exciting thing to us.
We joined Countryside. We loved it. I mean, we started listening to Eric and just loved all the messages in his sermons. And then not too long after we started coming here, they announced Darkwood. And I looked at my wife and said, that's why I'm here. That's one of the reasons I was called here, I think.
Well, I can tell you that for 47 years that we've been married, my husband has never felt comfortable in a church. And he'd go on Sunday morning with me, but to him it was just get up, sit down, sing a song, pray, and it just never connected for him.
I think it gets the message out there. I think we reach out and show people that there is something in church, and there's something to come back to. I know myself, I left church for a while. I didn't really thinker was placed for me there. I didn't believe in the organized religions, and then all of a sudden I started hearing this message, and I thought, you know, this is something I can live with.
So since he tried Darkwood Brew, we have been here probably 90% of the time. And when we aren't, he really misses it. Mm-hmm. And that means a lot to me because I had pretty much given up having a spiritual experience with my husband where we would share in a service of some kind.
I learned from both the traditional and from this service, but this is an extension of the service. I just feel like this gives me something that I might not get otherwise. It gives me the opportunity to sit down and hear these stories from the Bible and apply them in real life situations.
But with Darkwood Brew, he gets something out of it. And I can't help but think that there are a lot of people who are that way, who don't go to church on Sunday morning because it just means a certain kind of routine to them, I guess.
I was at a conference recently in St. Paul where I ran into a pastor from Waukesha, Wisconsin, who has found Darkwood Brew to be very helpful for his group and his congregation and his community as a way of being able to see that there is a larger perspective that they can put on the activity and work of God in the world. And they feel connected in ways that they don't necessarily get connected in their own congregation, but through Darkwood Brew, they're able to be connected to us here in Omaha, to Countryside and the ministries that we do, to people who are all across this globe in Australia or China or wherever they happen to be. And for this particular congregation, it provides them with a sense of energy and purpose that God is still speaking in the world.
What you do in facilitating Darkwood Brew is by no means small. It's a very big ministry for me because as a pastor of a small church in a rural community, I'm able to connect with Christians all around the world.
We're going to have to find a way to bring all the parts of Christianity together, if you will, at least in the worship experience from time to time. Darkwood Brew offers that experience. Unlike, I really think it's probably the only one I know that is doing it now with showing growth, if you will, and increased depth of interest.
The thing that I like about logging online and checking out the Darkwood Brew is I'm not the pastor, I'm not a leader, I'm not anything. I'm just sitting down, listening to some conversation, hearing some new ideas and insights. One thing I love is being exposed to new voices that I've never even heard of.
I think things like Darkwood Brew offer a place where thinking Christians who want to move beyond perhaps the traditional progressive label or some visions of evangelicalism can find a place to bring their questions, but also to bring their sophistication.
And I don't know that I would have been able to find that as a pastor, because sometimes you do have to have that surety and certainty, and so you can't share that, hey, I'm theologically, man, I'm searching and I'm trying to find and I'm wrestling and I'm questioning and I need to find that somewhere.
I think what's happening here is hugely important, and I want to thank you for the support you've given to it so far.
Just so you know, we're going to just talk a little bit more about outreach. I'm going to have Chris talk about who we're touching, both locally and externally. Mark Waterstradt's going to just talk, because he's had experience with the outreach piece there and its ministry, being a ministry of the church. And then I will come back and give you cost of operations so that you get an idea what the general overlay for a cost of it. And then we have, we're going to talk about the funding strategy so that you understand where we're going in the future. And then Eric will be concluding with a few comments after that. So, Chris?
I just want to say that Eric has been praying harder than anybody else, and apparently he's well connected because it's snowing. God loves Eric more than God loves me, apparently. Anyway, Darkwood Brew has changed my life completely. It brought me to Omaha, actually. And the idea and the creativity that goes behind it is exactly the stuff I was yearning for as a pastor living in North Dakota. Trying to find connections, trying to find progressive ideas to talk to my congregation about. I was in the Lutheran church, and we're talking about the sexuality issue and trying to decide whether or not they were going to allow ordained gays and lesbians to be in committed relationships instead of being celibate. That was a huge thing for the Lutheran Church while I was going through that. And there were no small group ministry kinds of resources out there to talk about that at all. The Lutherans were not creating them. Nobody was creating them. And that's exactly the kind of stuff that Darkwood Brew is up to. And it could be useful all across the denominations and all across the country. So it is the reason why I'm here. It's one of the main reasons why I'm here. And I love the work that I do with Darkwood Brew, as well as all the other things. But the connections that we have are connections that we make through the internet family, so to speak. We use Facebook. We use all the social medias. We use Twitter and Stumble and a bunch of other stuff to talk about Darkwood Brew and to get us there. And through this, look at the folks that we are constantly growing in the number of people that are following us, liking us on the social media, that are listening to our announcements about who's coming up, and it brings people into the episodes that then get online for the chats and then add their participation in the conversation during Darkwood Brew, which then feeds the small group interaction that's happening. It's just one thing leads to another, and we're constantly growing. Since our public launch, the recorded episodes only, look at the rise that has done. Just not even the live. That's not the live viewership. That's the recorded episodes. Oh, I'm sorry. We went from 431 in January of 2011 to just short of 6,000 in January of 2012. And now we've hit an all-time high in November of 2012 at 7922, just short of 8,000 views per month. This is per month for Darkwood Brew. So that's connecting people all over the world. And where we're getting these from, the countries other than the United States that are viewing these episodes are China. The number one place is China. Look at that. Percent of viewers. 5% of all the viewers that we have of those 8,000 per month are coming from China. The next country is Canada at 3%, Australia at 2%, and the United Kingdom at 1% of those 8,000 monthly viewers. We also have in the last 6 months a rise in the loads of the videos that have happened. When you say loads, you're saying people that have pulled up the video to watch them. June, 3,000. July, just over 5,000. August, we had a really nice peak of 7711. September, 6204. October, 6413. And then another peak in November at 7922, our all-time high. So like Eric was saying earlier, we raise to a certain peak, and then we plateau off for a while, and then we go to another new peak, and then we plateau there for a while, and then we keep growing. And that doesn't see all the trends lead to it's going to continue to do that. The more and more people talk about it, it'll happen almost exponentially. It'll grow that much faster. And now we have all kinds of people talking about us. So not only do we have outreach in other countries and through Facebook and online and all that, but we have outreach right here in Omaha. Of our new members that have been coming into Darkwood Brew, to Countryside Community Church, 20% of them come through Darkwood Brew. 20% of our new membership comes through Darkwood Brew. There are tons of people that only come to Darkwood Brew. And then we have lots of people that use Darkwood Brew as supplemental to their Sunday morning worship. They're here in the Sunday morning worship, and they extend that worship through Darkwood Brew by literally being present here for that extended conversation. One of the things they asked me to talk about was, how does this touch the ministers of the world? One of the largest groups of people that have been watching what we're doing that we didn't even account for at the beginning. We were thinking we'd hit a lot of 30-year-olds, you know. Who we hit were the ministers. Ministers like Cody Stoffer, who you saw in the video, that always have to be on and always have to be the one who know it all for their congregations. They can watch Darkwood Brew as a worship service without having to be in charge. They don't have to know everything. In fact, they can learn something new. And then that feeds them and who they are, and it returns back to their congregation. So for every minister that you have watching Darkwood Brew, you're probably touching another 500-600 people weekly through their ministry then to their congregation. And that's not just people outside of here. It feeds me, and I feed you. So see how that works? Ministers are a big part of our ministry here. And it just grows exponentially how we touch lives through one person to the next. This is our new website. We have all kinds of conversation going on there. We have blogs that have conversations, that have input and comments that come back. So the conversation just keeps going and going. We're making connections everywhere. Mark Waterstrad. Carrie Falk. Katie Falk. Katie Falk.
Okay, we'll go Mark first, and then we'll get Katie next. So.
Thank you. Like many of you, Lori and I count ourselves as extraordinarily fortunate to be members of Countryside, that we have found a church home that helps reinforce what we've always believed. As a teenager, I struggled living in a predominantly Jewish community with questions with my pastor, my family's pastor, when I thought I heard things from the pulpit that suggested that perhaps my Jewish friends didn't get to go to heaven too. And that was something that I struggled with in college and as a young adult. And when Lori and I first moved to Omaha in 2002 without any family, we spent our first year going to 25 different churches, trying to find one that would be our home. And eventually we gave up, and we joined the Presbyterian Church at 150th and Blondo, because that's where we lived, and we'd always gone to Presbyterian churches before, and so it was easy. And about 6 months into our membership in that church, the senior pastor got up one morning and announced that the church was going to secede from the Presbyterian Church because he'd be damned if he ever let a gay in the door. Lori and I stood up and we marched out, and I said, I'm done. I'm not going to a church again. 4 years later, in the fall of 2007, Lori told me enough was enough and we needed to go back to church. And that as the man, it was my responsibility to lead us back into a church or something ridiculous like that. And we now, at this point, lived here in Westside. And she said, you know, there's this church right in front of the high school, and it's a UCC church. And I didn't know anything about the United Church of Christ, but that's the kind of church she'd gone to when she was a kid. And so we came in and we walked through the front door, and it said, all are welcome, in the pavement. And I cried. We are so blessed to have this church that we can come to. And so then we fast forward a few years later, right after Darkwood Brew started, and we were on spring break in Sedona, Arizona, and you saw a group from Sedona in the video. Lori's aunt and uncle had just left their church, the only UCC church in Sedona, Arizona, because they'd had a very similar experience with a pastor saying, I don't care what the church says. Homosexuality is a sin, and I'm not going to let them in the door. And they were grieving over the loss of their church, and they didn't know where they were going to go to church. And I said, well, you know, I've been to a couple of these nighttime news services at our church. I've never tried to watch it online, but we've got this crazy thing called Darkwood Brew. Perhaps that would be interesting to you. And now 25 of them meet in their home every week and have for a year, and they consider Darkwood Brew their church. And then you fast forward just a little bit later, closer to home, sitting in the stands of the pool here at Westside. Our son Graham swims 3 nights a week. And I was sitting there one evening, and a friend of mine who's a physician and I were talking, and I mentioned Countryside, and he said, oh, we used to be members at Countryside, but my wife made us quit when they started talking about all the gay stuff. And so she won't let me go back. And I said, well, you know, we've got this recorded service. Perhaps it would be interesting. It's darkwoodbrew.org. A month later, I went back and again ran into him, and he said, thank you so much. I've watched every episode from the beginning that I was able to watch online. I now consider myself to be a member of Countryside again, and I watch it at 2 o'clock in the morning in the hospital after surgery, because my wife won't let me go to the church, but I get to be part of Countryside because of Darkwood Brew. And so when I look at Darkwood Brew, it's not my service. I like being here in the morning on Sunday mornings, but I love the ministry of Darkwood Brew and how we take all our welcome and we give it to others around the world who don't have what we have here on a Sunday morning.
And we asked Katie. Katie is someone who has come in through the doors through Darkwood Brew, and I just wanted her to say a word.
Okay, good thing you told me to just say a word, because otherwise I would talk all day. I came to Darkwood Brew from rural Alaska, where Darkwood Brew was the only church I could get, because my friend Dinah said, if you really want to go to church, you can go to church online. Come and see Darkwood Brew, and so I started. Actually, I moved to Alaska 15 years ago. I did a few years of Dancing with the Devil. I found Jesus, but I couldn't find a church. So when I was talking to Dinah about that, she said, come to Darkwood Brew. So I did. And I started just watching a few of the recorded episodes, and then I discovered you could do it live. And then I discovered the chat room. And it never occurred to me that there were lots and lots of people reading the chat that you were writing. And so I, poured my whole life story out, and I now have like some really good friends in London and Australia and in lots of different places. So it's not only a wonderful place. The nice thing about the chat is you can ask questions. Those questions that you develop, I lost my life partner, why did this happen, that sort of thing. You can ask those kinds of questions on the chat room in Darkwood Brew, and everybody in the world will give you encouragement, and you just, you find a circle of support that's really, grateful for. So, and I moved back to Omaha a few months ago, and now I'm going to start going to Countryside Church because of Darkwood Brew. So keep it up.
Thank you. So I just want, the next two things is cost of operation. I'm going to give a quick highlight of overview of that, and then I'm going to have Deb McAllister come and talk about the online strategy to get donations outside of the church, and Eric will talk about the funding strategy, which you also have a copy of. So cost of operations, and now the numbers are smaller, so I'll talk it. The overall, you probably have heard about a $210,000 budget per year to do Darkwood Brew. And the cost of it, we have about 33, with the original grant, there's an infrastructure that was about $333,000. And that is already is part of the infrastructure. So ongoing is an annual cost, and there's the cost of the coffee house and maintaining the machine that sits back there in the barista area. We already have the HD internet studio, which is already outfitted, so there's no ongoing cost there. Operating expenses are things like DVD graphics, editing and the guided versions for the small groups, maintenance fund. That's about $51,000 per year. Or if you do it you can break it down into 6-week segments, and Eric will probably talk about getting sponsors for different series. It's about close to $6,000. Staffing, the staffing we do pay for some, and we do have volunteers for some of these positions. There's $105,000 for the staffing. That includes producers, the music that we bring in, project director. We have a coordinator that helps with the Skype guests. When we define who it is, they call them, contact them, arrange that Skyping to occur. Small group outreach, program director. So there's like 10 different positions that are listed in the staffing section. Production and distribution, we pay for high-speed Cox internet. And we have a dedicated line so that we don't create problems with the shows. The ability to stream it costs money. The tech support, the audio, video supplies, PayPal, web admin functions, that's about $24K. Marketing, there's another $10,150 for marketing, which totals to the $18,650 is marketing and advertising. And then there's a transportation housing, because we do have people that do come in and help us for some of the episodes. So the total of that comes out to be that $21,915 total. So that's where the $210,000 that is typically raised up as the cost for annual year. I'm going to ask Deb McAllister. She's going to just talk about there's been a team that has come together and put a strategy as how do we raise that money so that it's not coming out of the church budget, but how do we get funders, and then Eric will talk about the bigger strategy.
Eric's is the bigger. A number of us talked about, with the redesign of the website and a more central vision of the donate button, which we, as Eric mentioned, had been reticent to push in the beginning because we really didn't want this to appear to be a money-making endeavor, because that's not what it's about at all, as so often happens, I think, in televised ministry. So we've been slow and cautious about all of this. But now we're feeling very good about the service and the ministry we offer, and so we're making that button central. This is just a best guess. Like any of you who've started new businesses, you don't know for sure. You put the numbers together, and then reality will be your check. But we anticipated, remember, we're hitting 7,000 views a month. We anticipated that 100 people might be willing to give $5 a month. 25 perhaps would give $100 for the year. So this is how we built that budget, putting those, or built the anticipated income stream from donations. We anticipated that perhaps 150 people would be willing to give $10 a month, and we have some of these already. That another 30 people would give $25 a month, and I think you have this handout. I don't need to read you all of these numbers. Do they know? Okay, well, I'd be happy to read them because you too can edit our numbers because we kept passing them around. Well, that's the donate categories. But as I said, we anticipated various levels and put a number of persons. The higher the amount we would anticipate in a year that a person would give, the fewer numbers we attach to that. So I'm hopeful that those projections are reality. As I said, one never knows. But once we get up to speed with the donations being a seamless part of our operation, I think it's realistic to say we could raise $270,000 a year. None of us anticipate that that's going to happen in the immediate 12 months. I think we need to go after some other funding sources as well, and Eric will talk about how we are hoping to find some granting sources. We've been working on those documents.
All right, I've got it. Thanks. Yeah, just to bring this all to look ahead. Of course, years 1 and 2, the strategy was simply to have the grant pay for that, which we did, and we were able to manage that money very, very well. So we actually had a little bit of extra money to keep us going, besides what viewers have given. From the beginning, though, the strategy has been we have not anticipated we'd be able to be self-sustaining in years 3 and 4. That funding would come primarily through second-tier donors. You know, in the giving world, there are people, rare people like the Ravenscrofts, who will give without any track record to start something new. They are a very rare breed of giver. Most givers say, I want to fund success. So show me your track record, and if you need help to continue being a success or make that, then they will give. Those are the kind of donors that we are reaching out to right now, because we have a great track record of success. So now we're saying, okay, the world is benefiting. The world now, we cast our bread upon the water. Now we need some bread. So to speak. So along with that, then there are viewer donations. We were blessed with why one Darkwood Brew viewer recently gave us $10,000 out of the blue to start a challenge grant, so that we could actually kick off our campaign, inviting our internet community to start to give now and say every dollar for dollar we'll be matching that. We have a grant application in with our own Countryside Foundation to extend that money a little bit, so we can actually continue that dollar-for-dollar matching. When I was with Crosswalk America, walking across the country, we found the best way to raise money was to tell people your dollar will be matched by $1 extra. We raised $1,000 a day on that walk, primarily implementing that strategy. So that's where years 3 and 4 would primarily come from our viewing audience, and also from the second-tier donors. And already, I just got off the plane, from Arizona on Friday, meeting with a potential donor. I've been to Temple, Texas, also meeting with a potential donor we're waiting to hear from. So we're ongoing developing donors. I have some contacts from my own experience, and then we're also continuing to develop new donor bases. So we feel really good about it. In fact, you want my bottom line feeling about this, is in the long run, I'm actually not worried at all about Darkwood Brew getting funding. I'm actually more concerned about what do we do with all the money that's going to come in. I mean, really seriously, how will we use that judiciously in the future? So, and as I stated up front, the most Countryside would ever be asked for, and we stated this from the beginning, and we are going to remain true to this into eternity, is for the musicians, because this is an authentic third service for us. It is bringing new members. But if the world community comes in and washes us with funds, well, maybe we won't be paying that either. There's applying that to extending our ministry in other ways. In 2013, the potential since the world community has been giving to us, we're already funded through roughly late June, mid June to July already. So we wouldn't even have to come up with funds for a whole year of musicians. So the total that we would have to decide at the annual meeting whether we want to fund or not would be $13,000 off the 200. You saw $12,000 budget. Another way that we are raising funds actually is through this amazing series that we launched in May at morning services, which we're also paralleling at Darkwood Brew, called By This Way of Life. By This Way of Life is our attempt to articulate as best we can the theology of what we're calling convergence Christianity, Christianity that has already been part. I mean, is who we are. People who are tired of in the mainline, liberal mainline, saying, well, whatever the fundamentalists do badly, we're not going to do it all. So if they do Jesus badly, we won't do Jesus. If they do Bible badly, we don't do Bible. If they do Holy Spirit badly or prayer badly, we won't do that. People in this church have never accepted that. We want spiritual development, and we're not going to let the fundamentalists dictate our faith from us by writing it all off. And then there are other people from the post-evangelical side. There are folks who have left the evangelical side, tired of the rigidity, tired of throwing everybody into hell they don't believe, they don't agree with. They've been out in the wilderness, too. And we have more and more of our population are those what you call post-evangelical folks who are finding us because we do lift up spiritual values here. We're not just simply kind of old world liberalism. And those two groups that kind of been out in the wilderness with kind of post-liberal progressives and post-evangelicals are converging and discovering one another. This series, By This Way of Life, is 12 six-part series that we've been in since May to try to articulate a theology that is in that convergent mode, taking the best of the spiritual side development with the best of the progressive side, and seeing that this is really the heart and the core of the faith. Within 2 years, by Easter after next, we'll have the entire series done. Well, because we're also filming it at Darkwood Brew, we will have 2 years worth of resources to provide people. You can envision a seminary, for instance, who's increasingly seminaries are throwing lay people into churches to lead them because in the small rural areas they're really struggling, and they give a layperson like 10 weeks of training and say, go be a minister. Well, shoot. I stayed at Princeton for 5 extra years beyond my 3 years training, not wanting to be in academia, wanting to be in parish ministry, thinking there's no way in heck I can be a minister after just three years with the training. I mean, it takes some time. And so what this will allow a seminary, for instance, to do is to use the Darkwood Brew resources to develop cohort-based lay ministry curriculum. To train people in the parish, for instance. That's just one potential application. Also, because we do have these wonderful 6-part series that we can map out ahead, we can also say, we have a series, for instance, at Darkwood Brew. This next series is going to be called For the Love of God, Civil Conversations on the Bible and Homosexuality. We're actually not going to be paralleling exactly that series in the 9 and 11 o'clock service, but we are going to be doing a Darkwood Brew because Omaha seems to be headed towards a big spat over LGBT equality kind of stuff. And we thought, well, let's just take the Bible and invite all of Omaha into a Bible study. Thought, there's probably people who would be interested in funding that. And sure enough, the Sherwood Foundation was very interested in funding that. So we received a $50,000 grant from the Sherwood Foundation, 30 of which will cover, that covers the production of the series, and then that also gives us an extra $15,000 to just market, to tell Omaha we're doing this, invite Omaha into that Bible study. And they also love Carol Rogers, who's been singing with us, who's moving to Omaha from LA, and that's going to hire Carol on for 2 weeks every month for the whole year. So that's the kind of thing where I just got an email from Pacific School of Religion saying we're interested in talking with you about funding a series. I talked to Ben Guest at the national office. After Easter, we were already planning a series on faith and the environment. They said, you know what, we're doing this major campaign across the United States called For One Earth, starting on 4/1 of 13, and we're already partnering with the lead lodge in the Arbor Day Society to encourage people to buy, purchase, and plant 1 million trees. We'd like to talk to you about funding that series and inviting the entire denomination to come to Darkwood Brew, to make this like the television program during that campaign. Stuff like that. So this is just kind of, that's why I start worrying about how are we going to deal with the money that could come in, not, how can we continue to fund it. So anyway, this is all kind of recapped in here. I'm not going to belabor the point on that, but we do think that by year, as we go into our 5th year, we are planning for Darkwood Brew to be just simply self-sustaining through our viewership and through sponsorships. If we should be wrong, and again, our best wisdom is we still don't know what the heck we're doing. We're just, we try to do it. We're doing pretty good, I think. We have all kinds of backup strategies for this. Like if we were to suddenly, no money was to come in, there's all kinds of things we could do. For instance, we could decide, okay, we're not going to hire Scott Grissell to do the video editing of our small group resources. So we're going to put those down until we receive funding, and then we're going to do that. That would save us, a substantial, group of money. Another thing we could do is we would say, we're even thinking about this as a possibility anyway, but maybe we would take the summer off. That would allow us more time to fund that. We're actually thinking, even if we get the money, that might be a good idea, but just to give our crew a break, and we could keep Scott Grissell cutting up little chunks of our episodes and throwing them out onto YouTube, little viral pieces saying, you like this? Well, guess what? Darkwood Brew is starting up again in September, whatever. Anyway, we don't know. I'm not saying we're taking the summer off. I'm just saying we're just kind of thinking about that right now. But that also save money, and give us longer reach. So there's all kinds of backup strategies to do. But bottom line is, if the world community does not see that what we're doing is a value, then we really are missing a piece of the why we're doing this. And so, but we always felt that if we bless ourselves, bless our small groups, bless our people, give our average everyday people at Countryside an ability to say, oh, well, Brian McLaren's on? Oh, I'm going to tune in. I don't normally go to Darkwood Brew, but boy, he's interesting, or what have you. By blessing ourselves and sharing it with the world will bless us. And that's exactly what's happening. And since Darkwood Brew started, and since we started talking about convergence, the weirdest and wildest thing of all, maybe, in the long run, is convergence. We started talking about convergence Christianity in roughly May. Since then, it's taken off all around the country. People are talking about convergence Christianity all around, and they're saying that's what we've been seeing too. We just never had a name for this. These post-evangelicals and post-liberal progressives out in the wilderness, escaped Egypt, so to speak, and thinking they're the only ones out there, and then they're suddenly realizing, oh, you're here too, and you have gifts to share that I've been yearning for, and you've got gifts to share that I've been yearning for. That has been recognized so much that Phyllis Stickle's been writing about it now, speaking about it. Random House started a new publication, a new imprint. They'd been noticing the similar dynamics. They met with me at the Wild Goose Festival in June. They said, we never had the name. We were going crazy. It's convergence is what's going on. I thought, well, that's awfully nice. That's a nice compliment about what they're recognizing here. Well, they put their stuff behind it. They actually they didn't have a name at the time. They sent me an email in November saying, thanks for your advice and what you're doing there. And they sent me a link, and I went to the link and said, Random House announces new press, Convergent. It's a huge thing. So because it's getting out there, our big challenge now is to articulate what convergence really is all about. Because now, Random Houses, their bottom line is not what is the ministry of Jesus Christ in the world. Their bottom line is what's the cash register. So as much as that is a blessing to us, it's also a challenge, is to continue to articulate that. But bottom line is, mark my words, if we continue as we are, within the next several years, Countryside Church, I think, will emerge in this country as the new. People are going to look at Countryside Church like they used to look at Riverside Church, as being the church's pulpit. Only Countryside Church is going to do it far differently than Riverside or those other big, huge steeple churches ever did, because those churches were built off a personality and a pastor who's leading a bully pulpit, and who's spectacular and all that. In fact, James Forbes, who was the head of Riverside, he's coming here to speak on January 13th. Spectacular preacher. He's made for that kind of model of a church, of somebody who's just blow your mind preaching, and everybody looks to James Forbes as the leader. What we're doing here is we are spreading the revolution at the grassroots. We're bringing in all of the James Forbes and the Martin Luthers and of the Reformation in through streaming, bringing them through Skype guests. We're bringing in the world community through the chat and so forth. It's becoming a revolution that's at the grassroots. So it's a completely different model. It's an upside-down pyramid that we're starting, and if we ever become the Riverside, it's on a completely flipped model, inviting the world to engage in a work of the people. So that's what moves you.
I just wanted to ask, I know that grant writing takes time, and I don't know if you have someone identified that, are you going to, be able to cover that with your current staffing levels?
You have had a couple of helpers. One you heard from was Deb McAllister, and we've had we've had a suggestion of perhaps more help. If you are a grant writer, we'd love to talk with you, because we're continuing. We'll definitely be looking at more and more grants.
If someone logs into the live stream and watches the broadcast and they don't enter the chat room, are you still able to track that number?
Yes. We can tell where you are.
This is just a housekeeping question. Do you have more of the sheets that outlines your progress? Yeah, I notice they're short. They're a little. They're
If you didn't get one of these, just see me, and I've got more, and I'll get.
And the other question is, do you have the finances that you had on the screen available also?
We can get a copy of that.
Yeah. So Dan said we. Okay, go ahead.
Just touch base with me afterwards, and I'll get you. I'll run some copies off of that. Here's some extras of that. Any other questions? So the last bit, if you want to flip 2 slides, is that on January 5th at 10 a.m. on Saturday morning, if you know somebody that would be interested in hearing this information again, we'll be doing it on a Saturday morning, January 5th. So if there's somebody that's having questions about Darkwood Brew, we will be repeating this, and some of we've recorded it also, so we can play back some of the questions and some of the comments that were made. And then finally, on January 13th, because Darkwood Brew this has been a 2-year process, on the 13th there will be a short congregational meeting after this second service to ask the question, do we continue Darkwood Brew as a ministry of the church? And if so, what's creating an advisory board to help guide it in its future progress. So that it'll be a one-time question. Saturday, that was me copy and paste. This is Sunday. Sunday, yeah, this is Saturday. This is Saturday.